and welcome to today's APBP webinar. We're going to be taking a look at the topic of women and family cycling, and this is a joint program today through APBP Live and the Women's Cycling Project. My name is Kit Keller, and I am the Executive Director of the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals. We have with us today on the talk team, and we hope that we'll do more listening than talking, actually, Kevin Lucas, who is wrapping up his APBP fellowship, and Fionnuala Quinn, who is currently speaking to us from Virginia. And Fionnuala has recently had some transitions, so she was just telling us about that as we jumped on the webinar today. And I'd like to turn the program over to Fionnuala just for a quick update, recap of what's happening, and then we're going to open the conversation up to anyone who wishes to participate in the conversation, and you can do that by raising your hand. So with that, Fionnuala, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Kit. This is great that we're getting to talk about this topic. And for those who are listening who aren't aware, this is sort of a long-term conversation we've been having that started just 5 years ago after Kit was involved in a project where she was involved in a team that produced the Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety and Mobility in Europe report. And as part of that, and after seeing so many people cycling in Europe, we started discussing questions about why more women were cycling in cities in Europe as opposed to North America. And that sort of has led us on a long conversation over the last few years. And it's great that we're talking today about family cycling. That is one of the big ideas, I think, that's been coming out in recent years regarding the evolution of cycling, and in many ways has the potential to transform the face of cycling. In many ways, it's getting to the role of the bicycle in short trips in the community. And it's been terribly interesting for me as I'm in the Northern Virginia area, close to Washington, D.C., and we have a lot of people very involved in bicycling from the agency side, at the federal level, state and local level. And we also have a lot of people involved in bike advocacy, both at the regional level, very local level, and at the national level. And we have an awful lot of people who are very involved in working on transforming the face of cycling. And this element of the conversation is really coming out very strongly in our area. It has organized around critical mass, which is local groups. First we had critical mass in DC. Megan Odette set it up as a volunteer, where she started organizing family cycling events, both rides and forums where people got together. And that inspired many more critical mass groups in our area, where we now have Critical Mass DC, Critical Mass Arlington, Critical Mass Alexandria, Rockville, and Gaithersburg, all separate groups, all modeled in the same fashion. And there are similar groups all around the country where people are getting together, riding, but then they're also talking about equipment, design issues, and they're really starting to address the needs of families and getting children out on the road at all different ages for all of the sort of short trips that people want to make in their community. I think there's many people have decided they want to hang up the minivan keys and are looking for other ways to get around the community. So it's actually very interesting in our area. We now have a lot of activity around different types of bicycles. You know, the fact that people wanted to get their children onto bicycles with them from a very early age, and then wanted to continue as they dropped them to daycare or to school, or as they went around the community, has led us to a point where people have all sorts of equipment, different types of cargo bikes, long tails, tag-alongs. Everywhere you go now where there are families, people are talking about issues like electric assists and kits that they're using to transform their bike. So we have a very active conversation going on locally. We have events. Critical Mass DC has organized a major event that they call the ABCs of family biking, which attracts hundreds of families, and people get to see equipment and show their equipment and do fun activities, and they've teamed up with the Safe Routes to School officials to do that. WABA, our regional bike advocacy group, has held a family biking town hall. A couple of weeks ago, Arlington County held Family Biking 101 with various panelists speaking on issues. And as part of this conversation, we have new leaders coming out, and we now have, the Arlington Bike Advisory Committee is led by one of the Critical Mass leaders, Jillian Burgess. So we have a very interesting conversation developing locally as we sort of get into the transforming face of cycling. And I did want to mention one person along the way, because I think she, Emily Finch, if people recall, she was the lady in Portland who became famous for a short while because she brought her 6 children around on her bike, and she had no car. And she sort of catapulted onto the scene and sort of showed what could be done. Now, really, there were lots of people bringing, 1 or 2 children or figuring out ways just how to get their family around. So it really has been a very interesting sort of evolution of the conversation, and then, transforms into the conversation about how we build our infrastructure and what the policies are for all the elements of bicycling. So that's where we are right now, very much an evolving conversation that's, developing in a very interesting fashion.
Fanula, thank you. And we thought it would be fun to show some of the new types of bicycles that are coming out, and people are using this particular one as a photo, I believe, from Portland, Oregon, taken by an APBP member, Kevin Whitted. And one of the issues that I think many of us have faced as we've wanted to put together presentations and talk to people about women cycling is the fact that we just don't have a lot of photos of people, women particularly with children, cycling. So what I'd like to do now is open it up for some comments and some discussion, and it would be really helpful. I'm going to go back to our original screen that we were showing a bit earlier, and then I'd like to jump on to the new screen of we're updating the Women's Cycling Project website, so that is under construction, but we're seeking to show some of these different types of facilities that are encouraging more women and girls and families to bicycle, as well as we wanted to share with you the family biking guide from San Francisco, which, as Fanula Quinn has pointed out, is really just a fantastic resource, and is, even though it came out in 2012, it's kind of still sort of state of the practice. So let me see if I can show you the table of contents here. And that will give you a sense of the information that you'll find in the guide itself. So with that, let me just see, I'm working from a different computer here, so give me just a moment to get back to my GoToWebinar page. The way that we'll approach this is, if you have a comment or a question that you would like to raise, if you can raise your hand on your screen, then I can open up your audio, and then you'll be able to make a comment. And what we're hoping will happen today in the spirit of APBP Live is that we'll have a good exchange about some of the other activities that people are doing throughout the U.S. and Canada around encouraging women and families to bicycle. So with that, I would like to see if there is anyone who has a comment where I can open up your line. All right, great. I see Lawrence Levine, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name. So your line is now open if you'll offer a comment and introduce yourself as well, please.
Okay, I hope that you can hear me
Yes,
all right.
we can. Yes, indeed.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I guess perhaps a plug first. In the Seattle area, Cascade Bicycle Club is launching a program called She Bikes, and you can find out more about that on the cascade.org website. She Bikes, I believe it's two separate words, and that they're having a kickoff for that program on Tuesday, April 7th. And so that's just a little plug there. I had emailed city staff in Olympia suggesting a topic that needs attention, and I guess it seemed very appropriate for family cycling encouragement. I wanted to bring it up here. Periodically, Olympia and other cities review their engineering design guidelines. It's a very specific set of guidelines that will tell you, curb radii must look like this, and driveway aprons must look like that. It's very specific. And I was realizing as I was looking at a pedestrian refuge island provided for a trail crossing at a road, that the actual refuge would be insufficient for anything longer than a standard single bike. So anything with a larger wheelbase would not be provided refuge and would be literally sticking out into the travel lanes, the general purpose lanes on either side. So I wanted to bring that up, and I realized I wanted to inform my city staff of, we're really trying to encourage family cycling, and perhaps trails and trail crossings in the pedestrian refuge islands that trails often use as they're crossing roads. The trail facilities might be particularly inviting for families, even if you weren't biking on a long tail or long wheelbase bicycle. You might have, be it one or more adults and one or more kids, and just that clump, that little family herd, if you will. We might need to rethink the requirement for width or amount of refuge provided in these pedestrian crossing islands, and I wanted to bring that up because I think it's a pretty important thing for proper facility design for family cycling.
Lawrence, that is an excellent point, and we've already had a comment about that. So I would like to go next to Natalie. If you're able to speak, I would like to open your line. I'll close Lawrence's, and Natalie, your line is open, and then afterwards we'll go to Andrea Clinkscales, who will talk with us about She Bikes. So Natalie, is your audio available?
You can let me know how well you can hear me or not.
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
So I guess when biking around, we don't even have the advantages where I reside, as well as Seattle does, from what I've heard. But I know we just had a project that was done, and if you think about how the curb ramps are often designed, bicycles really aren't very user-friendly from that perspective. Well, the integration of them to use those facilities, in addition to the median islands that you were talking about. And that's kind of one of those things that I think the knowledge, and even if you look at the design for roundabouts, all of these are kind of issues as you start to think about how we're using just beyond bicycles themselves.
That's an excellent point, and thank you so much for sharing that, Natalie. And where are you speaking to us from today?
I live in New Mexico.
All right, great. Thanks, Natalie. I'm going to mute Natalie's line now and then go next to Andrea or Andrea. If you'll tell me how to pronounce your name and introduce yourself, please. Your line is open. Andrea? Andrea? Can you hear us? And perhaps you don't have access to audio, so let me, well, we're seeing if we can get her on the line. She is leading She Bikes and can talk about it a bit more, and she is the principal planner at the Cascade Bicycle Club. So Kevin Lucas is sharing his screen with that information about the event coming up on April the 7th, and we're eager to know more about it. Andrea, it looks like you may have muted your own line. If you'll try to unmute your line.
And Kit, I'll just jump in while Andrea's unmuting, just talking about, I mean, one of the things, again, with this developing conversation around here is that the issue about the size of the bike is really coming up through this conversation. And a great example around here where we've a new facility really newly opened is the Fairfax County Bike Parking Garage. And as part of that facility, they have designated spots for oversized biking, for oversized bikes. One of the issues that comes up often is that people want to do bike racks where you lift your bike up and attach your bike, and other people are saying, well, no, my bike has attachments. You know, we have seats on there. We want bike parking on the ground. The design issues are coming out as part of the family biking conversation. And I will also note one other thing. The most recent version of the AASHTO bike guide, the 2012 guide, does get into and recognize that there are different types of bikes. And I think it's the first time that we had good information about dimensions of bikes with all their attachments. And it recognized, you know, bikes with trailers, tandem bikes, etc., to try and help those who will be designing future facilities to accommodate different types of bikes. Obviously, we're left with a lot of legacy facility that does not accommodate these types of bikes, but it's certainly a recognized issue.
Thanks for that, Fanula. We're having a little bit of tech issue with unmuting Andrea, so we're still working on that. But perhaps if you would like to, anything that you would like to post, Andrea, into the your question box, I would gladly read that. If or we can also go to a website that speaks more to this. Perhaps there's a bit more information behind what we're looking at now. So we'll do a bit more scrolling on that. So sorry about that. Who else has a comment or a question that we can take? Anything happening in your area that you would like to discuss or share or ask a question about? And I see that Byron Rushing's hand is up. So Byron Rushing is a board member of APBP, and he is on the staff at the Atlanta Regional Commission. So Byron, your line is open.
Hi, Kit. Great, thank you. I will just mention real briefly, we have a young, probably about a year-old group here in Atlanta that's mainly organized by Facebook as an extension of the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition called Families Bike Atlanta. And it's been a really interesting conversation given Atlanta's generally pretty new advocacy scene around bicycling in general, to have so many parents and so many really experienced parents jump into the conversation real quickly. We have done a couple real little kind of casual Sunday morning coffee things just to show off bikes and give people a chance to see what's happening. And I think it's starting to work its way more into the advocacy efforts, pushes for actual infrastructure conversations, as well as some of the city and agency policy conversations. Here at the Regional Commission, which is the MPO, we're doing a big bike and ped plan update this year, and really hoping to, if nothing else, feature pictures of women and family bikes a lot. I don't know quite what it's going to lead to in terms of policy, but it's nice to have vocal parents as part of the conversation as we start to move forward on this. And I'll just say too, I really appreciate the national movement towards families, because me as a guy who tended to be pretty fearless in his 20s have become a lot more conservative as I've had kids, and certainly ride much differently when I have both kids on the extra cycle. Takes me to a much more conservative and slow-paced type of riding. So I have talked to a lot of dads who have that same kind of dichotomy when they ride. And I'll turn it back over to Kit now.
Great. Thanks, Byron. I think this is a really important conversation, and it was fascinating to me to see how many gentlemen were participating in the national forum on women bicycling that was hosted earlier this month by the League of American Bicyclists. This is clearly a topic of great interest to many people. What we're going to try to do now is open up Andrea's line again, and let's see if that's working. I still see that you have yourself muted, so do you want to try to unmute? And are we hearing you now? Oh, darn. Well, we're disappointed because we would love to hear more from you. While we're still working to see if we can get an audio connection, I will say that Andrea has added a few comments here, and she says that a major issue is that women programs are often lumped into family biking. We need to keep this separated. Many women won't have kids, and many men bike with kids. So, good point. Well taken. Lawrence Levine has indicated that he has an email that he would be happy to share that he had sent to the City of Olympia staff regarding the refuge island issue. And we would welcome that, Lawrence. So if you will send that to apbp.fellow@apbp.org, we'll make sure that we get that posted to the Women's Cycling page and to this APBP live forum. So with that, I see that Stephanie Weber has her hand raised. So Stephanie, I'm unmuting your line. Welcome. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks. Glad to be here. And I guess I was just kind of piggybacking on Byron's comment about family biking at the same time that Andrea mentioned, there needs to be the differentiation between, moms on bikes and women on bikes, because I think both are important demographics when we're thinking about how we're planning our infrastructure. But I think the needs can sometimes be nuanced a little bit. But certainly families on bikes is very much a part of, our efforts through Safe Routes School. So we love that the momentum is picking up on kind of the more vulnerable user. And I'm excited, in addition to working for the Safe Routes to School National Partnership, I try to do a lot of things in my own community, which is a small community and does not have phenomenal infrastructure. And we see the lots of, strong female recreational riders, but I'm the only person in my community who has a cargo bike, and you just don't see that many women in my community, who are utility cyclists, and I definitely want to make an impact, in my own backyard as well as nationally. So.
Well, thank you so much for that, Stephanie, and thanks for all the work you're doing with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. Well done. Fanula, would you talk a little bit more about the demos of the different types of bikes that you've seen at the ABCs of Family Bicycling in the DC area?
Yes. As I had mentioned, Critical Mass DC has organized with the Safe Routes to School staff in DC and held this event on a school property, and actually it has outgrown the property. The event is incredibly popular with families. Families all show up by bike. Families show up with very small children because they are looking to, they're thinking ahead on their biking future. And I think many people, it's an evolution from when they were cycling, prior to kids, and they're staying in the city, they're not moving out, and they're figuring out how they're going to get around. And at this particular event, they have areas where they show cargo bikes, spot feeds, long tails, trailers, all sorts of attachments. There's always lots of discussion about attaching seats to the front as well as the back. I think I'd mentioned people are interested in the topic of assists when they're carrying, older children on the bikes. This is part of the conversation. And a lot of the conversation is about the cost. Because this equipment is not cheap, and this gives people an opportunity to try things out. They've seen it in Momentum magazine or they've seen it online, but people really want to kick the tires. And other people are very happy to, let people ride it, try it, tell them everything they know about that particular device, what the pros and cons are. It's been an incredibly important and informative way of transferring information within the community, and it also provides a forum for selling equipment. This equipment appears to move through many families. Families need some of the equipment, for a period of time. The kids get bigger, they move on to other equipment. So there's a big aftermarket. As I say, it's been a very successful event, and I do know that Critical Mass organizers have come in from other cities to see this event because people are considering holding similar events elsewhere. And of course there's a whole fun aspect. They set up, little races for the kids and, all sorts of stuff. There's definitely a lot of community happening around family biking in our area, which is just a very positive, happy aspect of everything. But I think that's an evolution of the fact that a lot of it is about restoring culture and transferring information in between people. That's a lot of what's going on as people sort of just create what they need in order to, create a biking life in the community.
Well, thank you, Fanula. Excellent points. We're going one more time to try to unmute Andrea's line. So let's give it a shot. Hello? Oh, gosh, we thought we had...
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hallelujah. Welcome. Please introduce
Hi,
yourself.
I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
The connection's really bad, but I'll go ahead and just give a quick, brief description of the She Bikes program. We will be launching the program on April 7th, a Tuesday in Seattle. The purpose of the program is really to address what we've seen and heard from our data on who bikes, when and where, why and why not. We do a statewide bike count in Washington State every year. I just did some analysis of gender between 2013 and 2014, and consistently over the last few years, only 20% of bike commuters have been women, and that doesn't seem to be changing. And so we know as advocates we're missing something in our programming and education. Am I still there?
Yes, you're good. We can hear you beautifully.
Okay. Sorry, terrible connection, but Yeah, so She Bikes is really a response to that phenomenon. So we will be really holding the space exclusively for women. We'll have activities, rides, clinics, classes exclusively for women over the next year. We've heard, Cascade Bicycle Club is very focused on big rides. We've heard from women that they don't feel comfortable on those rides. The rides aren't fun. Because, sometimes of male behavior. And even, with classes, women sometimes feel intimidated in like a fix-a-flat class. So we're having classes exclusively for those. On the 7th, we plan on really just having a big party. We want to see a diversity of women, so moms, not moms, young women, older women. We'd love to see folks from the LGBTQ community, folks from all over the city. And when we see who's really interested in participating, then we can start fine-tuning our programming. But this is just kind of a first shot at addressing this major gender disparity in the in the bike commuting world.
Well, thank you so much for all that you're doing. And would you give us a little bit more background about how you came to work with Cascade Bicycle Club and just a bit more background?
Oh, sure. I am an urban planner. I'm an active transportation planner. I've worked in the private sector and the public sector, but I just started with Cascade in the fall. A few folks had convened a team within Cascade just after kind of seeing these things play out in our free rides and our events and so on. And so there's really a core group of us that is making this happen at Cascade. Of course, we have phenomenal support from our executive director, Elizabeth Kiker. And then we were able to get funding through our diversity inclusion department. So that's really exciting. We have gender equity is addressed all throughout our 5-year strategic plan. It's something we take very seriously, and we know that to normalize biking, we have to get more women and more diverse women out on the road. But, we've heard that women don't feel safe and they don't feel comfortable. So some of that can be alleviated with programming. A lot of it can be alleviated with infrastructure improvements. So that's kind of the background. I have a history as a social worker working with women and girls, and so this is just a passion of mine, but really I'm a planner at heart too. So does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much. And pronounce your name for me, please.
It's Andrea Klink-Scales.
Andrea. Okay, very well. Thank you so much. And with that,
And
oh, go ahead.
could I ask really quickly, if anyone participating in the webinar has any experience specifically with inclusive programming or messaging, I would love to hear. Again, I think I mentioned in a comment that I think we need to be really careful to not mix women's programs with family biking. A lot of women are choosing not to have kids, and a lot of dads are just, as much as moms, having so much fun biking with their kids. So if anyone has any interest in talking to me more about that from like a programming, messaging, or policy level, I would love to connect.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Andrea. And with that, I'll close up your line. And I'd like to go next to Fanula to offer up some comments about the active involvement of the Potomac Peddlers Bicycling Club in the WABA program.
Yes, I did. I had mentioned this earlier to Kit. An interesting evolution around here is the Potomac Peddler Club is a long time, very established, very large ride club. I think it's like the second largest riding club in the country. I'd have to check that. So they've been very established. They are now a partial funder of the Women and Bicycles program, which is a part of the Washington Area Bicyclist um, um, organization, our regional advocacy group. So here we have this interesting crossover where they are supporting that work. The Women in Bicycles program is part of the advocacy program, and it gets funded separately to support a staff person. We're seeing all sorts of connections like that within the community where there's active support of these, completely new positions that didn't exist certainly 5 years ago, or they've only evolved in the last few years. So we're seeing support. People are recognizing, I think, the importance and value of these new positions and conversations. The Women in Bicycles program locally has a closed Facebook page where you have to get approved to join the Facebook page. It has about 3,000 people on there, and has an incredibly active conversation going all of the time on all sorts of issues. There's almost no cycling topic that can't be discussed on there daily, and all sorts of connections coming out of that. And to Andrea's point, I think locally here, the family cycling conversation has evolved to be separate from the women in bikes conversation. There's lots of crossover and lots of the same people pop up, but it has definitely evolved as a separate conversation, in part in recognition because of the dads and their involvement. And in a certain way, it may have evolved out of the women and bicycling topics that came up. People were like, well, this doesn't cover, the type of cycling we are, issues we're trying to address. It definitely has. There's been a lot of discussion locally about them being, separate topics, and trying to clearly define what the issues are regarding these areas of interest.
It's a fascinating conversation that we're having because these are new conversations, and we're really learning a lot as we're working our way through different types of bikes. It's been interesting to me to see how much the use of electric bikes has grown in many countries in Europe, and we are just at the beginning of seeing that in various parts of North America as well. Byron Rushing had a comment that I did post it, but I'd like Byron to share it verbally as well. Byron, I've unmuted your line. And perhaps Byron is not able to...
Okay, sorry.
Oh, very well.
Mm-hmm. Was that about Rebecca's sermon at the Atlanta Bike Coalition?
Yes.
She has a inclusive programming in general, a strong focus of hers. And it's actually had a lot of pushback from some of her longtime members who were looking for more rides to be organized, and she's had to kind of steer them towards her vision a little bit.
Well, change is often challenging for people. We know that. I'd like to unmute Allison Kendall's line because Allison has made an interesting point that we'd love to have her speak to. Allison, your line is unmuted.
Hi, everybody. I've been working, I'm a bicycle and pedestrian planner and architect, but I've been working with a lot of school programs to promote bicycle use, and what I find is we really need to engage the women and young girls separately from the boys. Because starting at around age 11 or 12, there is such a difference in confidence between, for something like cycling in the middle school girls versus boys. We literally taught a PE class, and we had to divide them into girls and boys just to provide the proper level of supervision for an on-road, on-bike training. And we had to boost the confidence of the girls and encourage them to be a bit bolder and kind of suppress the confidence of the boys and take it much slower in terms of giving them the okay to go on the road. It's because they were, not sufficiently taking precautions. So it was just two completely different approaches, and luckily we discovered that, inadvertently by dividing them like that. We really had to strategize completely differently. Similarly with university-age girls, we've been working with university students, and it's really the same phenomenon of the university-age women don't have very much past experience in cycling for transportation, and now as students they're relying on this, and they tend to engage in the kind of behaviors, hugging the curb and not taking the lane and not signaling, that kind of go with the lack of confidence. So they need to be singled out and sort of separately coached in kind of becoming more visible.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, for sharing that. And I'd like to mention that when I had first moved to Washington, D.C., I was coached by two women, one of whom had grown up in Austria and bicycled quite a bit, and then another woman who had bicycle commuted in the D.C. area for quite a long time, and that made all the difference to me as well. So I would next like to have Kevin Lucas speak a bit to the discovery of some data from the Twin Cities. So Kevin, and if you want to share your screen with that information.
Yeah, I found an article while looking this up earlier about women cyclists in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and apparently it says here, depending on the data, between 37% and 45% of Twin Cities bicyclists are women, which is obviously well above the averages of the United States and Canada, which are both around 25%. And the article goes into how the universities in those areas may have an impact and play a part in the number of women, but they also speak to how Minneapolis has made a lot of headway in adding a lot of separated lanes and bicycle boulevards and other infrastructure and design improvements that they believe are what has led to this increase in women cycling. And I think that speaks to a lot of what we need to see is that the way cycling improvements started initially was they kind of favored the most confident cyclists, and when we're talking about things like, say, taking the lane and signaling, those type of things, those assume a level of confidence just to be able to get on the road first. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I think we have to take a step back and look at the whole picture, and we have to remember that it's about changing the whole culture of the road as well, not simply having the cyclists be able to confidently move on it as is.
Thanks, Kevin. And it looks like Natalie would like to make a comment also about the issue of take the lane. And Natalie, you had a question as well about how to get a hold of a cargo bike. So your line is open if you'd like to ask those two questions, and we'll see who can respond and give you that information.
So I'll go for the easy one. The cargo bike, I haven't really investigated, and if anyone has any recommendations on where I can look at a cargo bike to use in Mexico, I would love that.
Perfect.
But with regards to the other part, I think fundamentally if you want to understand and be able to encourage families and women bicyclists, you need to provide facilities that are going to separate them from motorists. because right now the culture that we have in the United States is not conducive to having cyclists on the road. Women do not like to be harassed. They like to enjoy their cycling. They have a lot of stressors put on them to ensure the safety of their children, themselves, to take care of their families. So we need to provide them with a safe environment, and I do not agree with when people discuss that in terms of it's not a confidence level. It has nothing to do with my confidence or my ability in bicycling. It has everything to do with my preference as a researcher in the area of accidents and accident analysis. We do not have enough people paying attention to the road, whether it's for distractions, whether it's for impairment. And so I think this needs to be well understood that it's not a confidence issue. It's a safety issue, really, until we change the culture of the U.S.
And Natalie, that is something that the Green Lane Project, part of the People for Bikes program, has been working on, and APBP is partnering up with People for Bikes to showcase some of their programming around the Green Lane Project and the I think it's 4 cities that they've perhaps 6 cities that they've worked with in each of the 2 cycles. So thanks for pointing that out, and we're just taking a quick look to see if we can show you the image of Isabella, which is the creation of People for Bikes. And People for Bikes wanted an image to be able to talk with people about who is the target audience, or the design group, and there's a term in planning, and forgive me, I'm not remembering it right now, as to, are we designing for confident cyclists? Are we designing for people who would like to bike more if they felt safer? Who is that person? So here's a photo, an image shared from the People for Bikes website of Build It for Isabella, which I think is just a brilliant image. And Isabella will introduce you to her family with whom she likes to bike, and that may be the best way for us to introduce this kind of conversation. So it looks like Byron has his hand up, and I'm going to unmute your line. I think that's a new question that you have, Byron.
Oh yeah, I was going to echo that some of the voices that we have in the family bikes movement are people who have stayed in town. Atlanta's going through a real urban renewal right now. And so I think it's interesting that the vehicular cycling conversation, which has dominated American cycling, doesn't work for people, and they're so involved with their community already that they're really interested in having these infrastructure conversations. So I was going to echo my earlier comment that we have such great conversations going on with new parents who don't know anything about bike planning, but are jumping onto Green Lane's websites and learning a ton and really getting good experience and having a great conversation about it.
Super. Thanks, Byron. Good point. And we have had a response to the question that Natalie posed about how to get a hold of or at least find out where you might be able to find a cargo bike. And I know there's a gentleman in the Chicago area, and I want to say his name is John Lund, who has been importing cargo bikes for some time, and I had a chance to ride one at a street fair in Chicago a number of years ago, and it was really eye-opening, to Fanula's point that it makes a huge difference to be able to see and test this equipment yourself. It's not a small investment, so we want to make sure it's going to work for us. Okay, so with that, I'll ask Fanula if you have any comments.
Yes, I actually wanted to add something on to what Byron had said, and I think it was another point earlier. Is a useful device over the years for talking about, the range of cyclists has been talking about who want to design for 8 to 80. However, the family cycling voices are saying, no, wait, that doesn't serve us. We want to be able to bike from the time, our children to be able to get on their bikes as young as possible. So they are really going all the way back and saying, no, we want a whole biking life. And they're talking and looking at all the issues and equipment issues and design issues through all the stages. So that's been very interesting. They're saying, age is too late. We need to start sooner. And I have to say, I just wanted to make a little comment. I took my teenage daughters to Amsterdam. We stayed right downtown, and they saw everybody biking around, and that was great. And we didn't realize we were staying a couple of doors away from a school until the first morning after we arrived, and it was school drop-off time. And we saw parents arrive on every shape and type of bicycling device to drop their children off and then hang around and chat. And it was such an amazing sight that both of my daughters, who've been listening to me for years about biking issues, suddenly were transformed and basically announced they were trying to figure out how they could move to Amsterdam. They suddenly wanted this life. When they saw, when they saw the families and how they were living, and it really is a contrast to, drop off in the community I live in, which is a much different, much less social thing when it's from minivans and SUVs. So it just, for my children, it was transformative to actually see this on a large scale in real life.
Great point. That's one of the beauties, really, of the Walk to School days that have brought together so many more parents in social settings. It's been a lot of fun to watch that and be involved. It looks like Sarah Cushman has a question. So, Sarah, I'm unmuting your line. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Larry. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I feel like I'm going to bring up the load, like a lightning rod element. I want to preface this by saying I identify as a woman. I'm a parent of a second grader, and I also do Safe Routes to School consulting work. But I struggle sometimes with what I feel like is this culture of fear that permeates the women and family biking conversation. So many of these ideas are important. So I completely agree in the work that I've done, whether it's helping a mom I know hook up her first bike trailer, or coaching people through their commutes, or helping families try out equipment. I love the idea of providing mini loans that would help families buy equipment, and I know, creating more flexible work schedules so that moms and dads can do school drop-off by bike and that kind of thing. But I don't want to discount any of those things. I think they're super important, but sometimes it feels like the separated infrastructure conversation. And you also need to know about me that I have zero tolerance, or I have very little tolerance for risk. So I feel like a super confident bike commuter, but I'm also not an adrenaline seeker by any stretch, and I've never been anything but a utilitarian bicyclist. But the separated infrastructure piece just feels like it's giving up on us as women in a way, or giving up on us as families, and that we can't actually build the skills that we need to do. And I feel like signaling, whether I'm on a separated facility or not, I should know how to signal. There's some basic things that I think are really important and fundamental education pieces that, and infrastructure can't be funded in most places. I'm in Maine, and we have, so little funding, and so to have to think about all separated facilities, we're never going to be able to build on that stuff. So I'm not a hardcore vehicular cyclist, but I guess I bring this conversation as a woman, that I struggle a little bit with this piece. Anyway, so thanks.
Oh,
If anyone has thoughts about that, I'd love to hear it.
great. Thanks, Sarah. And Sarah raises a really good point. I've been through the cycling training that the league offers back in the day when it was called Effective Cycling, and really learned a lot more about feeling more confident. And of course, I had coaches and mentors who were biking with me in Washington, D.C., where it was pretty heavy traffic often and lots of drivers from other parts of the world who were sometimes challenging to be around. So that's a really good point. And as we're talking about infrastructure, we also need to be talking about programming at the same time. And one of the aspects of the international scan that we saw is so many other countries have these great safety programs and traffic education programs that they run from, the littlest ages on up, and that is just not happening in, certainly not in the U.S. Perhaps Canada is better about that, but it's such a disappointment to me how much money we have squandered on safety messages that get rolled up in pieces of paper and thrown out over time, and we keep reinventing the wheel without making a huge difference. So good point. And I'd like to go next to Byron, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up and let you go. So again, thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. And Byron, your line is open.
Sure, and I was getting a little bit of feedback earlier, but I want to echo Sarah's point that my wife and I ride with our 3-year-old and 1-year-old, not every day of the week, but we try to do at least one day of the week to commute to work, and then weekends entirely by bike. And we get so much more positive questions out on the road than we do anything like anger. I've gotten one chastising comment about riding with my kids, but at least every day or every other day that we're out there, we get tons of questions from people when they look at my wife's box bike and my long tail about what the heck is that thing? Isn't it cool that you're out there with your kids? I wish I could do that with my kids, but I'm too scared or something like that. So I'm going to end that it's like really positive most days. And Atlanta could be more comfortable, but we pick neighborhood streets, so don't worry too much about infrastructure. But it's so much fun being out there with my 3-year-old son that I'll keep working for better infrastructure, but I'm not going to give up doing it with him in the meantime. So.
Well, thank you, Byron. And this is another reason why we really appreciate Byron's perspective on the APBP Board of Directors. I would like to thank and recognize Kevin Lucas, who is our APBP Fellow. We are losing him next week to go to an internship with Nelson Nygaard. So, Kevin, thank you for all your work on APBP Live and for your research and help on women's cycling. And then lastly, we'll go to Fanula Quinn to make any last comments. Fanula?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. It's been great having Kevin as part of APBP. We're definitely going to miss him. I did want to say, underlying, I think, all of these conversations is we're trying to increase cycling, and I think we all know that in part our safety and other things depend on the rates of cycling, that if we have much higher rates of cycling, if we see a broader range of people out there, cycling just will be better for everybody in all the different ways. So this is part of that conversation, and it's a really positive thing to see happening.
Great. Thank you, Fanula. And we'll consolidate and post the comments from the question box, and we'll keep this conversation going. So thank you for your participation today and for all you're doing to advance walking and bicycling in your communities. With that, on behalf of APBP, my name again is Kit Keller, and I'll wish you a great afternoon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.